The story of this week, of course, was the presidential debate. It now looks like it may be the only debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Going in, the big questions were whether Harris could persuade enough undecideds that, and maybe a few Republicans, that she's cut from presidential timber, and whether Trump could succeed in portraying Harris as radical comrade Kamala. So far, pundits have declared her the winner, but how did it play in those critical battleground states? And how did it play to our panel? Rick, what were your impressions?
Well, clearly, I think everyone agrees that Harris won the debate, but the important factor is going to be, will this translate into people in the swing states voting for her? And we'll have to wait until some of those polls come out. I think clearly Trump gave people more reasons not to vote for him, you know, eating cats and dogs, post-birth executions, and, you know, the fact that Israel won't survive 2 years if the Democrats win. But the question, I think, really comes down to, did Harris give people reasons to vote for her and the Democrats? And I think it was a little weaker there. What I thought actually the most telling policy issue had to do with the Affordable Care Act. Something that, you know, obviously came under the Obama administration, but was strengthened by Biden and Harris. And I think that they would do well to play on that, showing that it's an example of how government can improve people's lives, which is the central story to what Harris is saying. And, you know, Trump clearly was very ineffective in answering the question about that. After 9 years, he's still working on concepts of a plan, yes.
So, Aaron, what did you make of Harris's pretty full-throated embrace of fossil fuels?
Yeah, well, I think there's been a little bit of a wink and a nod to the climate community from Vice President Harris. She sort of indicated she's still with you, but she needs to make clear that she's going to govern everyone, and right now she needs to say some things about supporting fracking, even if that's a flip-flop from back in 2020. But look, the pundits like to talk about whether undecideds were changed by this debate. I think one of the things this debate did is it really fired up the Democratic base. I mean, we had people who, after Biden's ill-fated debate earlier this year, were just, you know, completely in tears. They were freaking out. Now they're ecstatic and they're pumped up and they're giving her $50 million in 24 hours after the debate. If those people show up to the polls, right, people who may or may not vote and they're like, you know what, she won, I want to back a winner, I'm going to go to the polls, that can make a really big difference ultimately in the outcome. So, you know, I don't love everything she's saying about fossil fuels, but I do think that she made a really good case for herself.
Okay, but, you know, as you said, the pundits are, you know, talk about the battleground states, and I think we don't know how it's going to play in those states, and she might run up the total in New York and California, but Jenny, she still needs to win those battleground states.
Yeah, 100%. Couple things I wanted to add. Debates are really important, and I'm disappointed to learn that Donald Trump has declined to do another debate. The American public learns from debates. It's a moment when even those who are not paying that much attention to politics, it kind of breaks through. It's the buzz, it's kind of what everybody's talking about, you can't escape it. And I think that's really beneficial for the American public. And even though they tend to be a bit facile, I really loved the format of this debate. I like the fact there was no audience, so there wasn't the kind of pandering to the audience for boos and cheers. I do agree very much with Rick that the policy aspects of Harris's messaging was thin. So she did a very good job of putting Trump on the defensive, but she still hasn't yet given the American public a clear understanding of her positions. Where is she going to lead from? We heard a lot about, you know, creating a middle-class opportunity economy, but beyond that, it's not entirely clear where she's taking the country if she's president. That's a weakness.
Yeah, you know, you're right. While I was watching the debate, I felt it was less of a debate between Trump and Harris and more of a debate between Trump and his dumb cluck mouth. And, you know, it was basically this whole thing that is kind of horse race. Oh, Trump did terribly badly. And he did. Of course, he's a racist, serial sexual predator. He's spewing all these lies about Haitian immigrants eating cats and dogs. But let's look at Harris. I didn't really find any policy positions from her. And she kept on supporting this war in Ukraine. And at the same time, it's almost dystopic when someone says that, let's be clear, this situation in Israel started with October 7th. That's a complete lie. It's like claiming that the civil war in US started because of Harper's Ferry. It makes no sense, right? So I am skeptical, and in the political science literature, there is this argument about this myth of the undecided voter. Apparently, the idea is that nobody is really an undecided. They're apathetic voters who are not going to vote at all.
Right.
But people kind of, if you ask them what leaning they are, they will tell you, and you know. Yeah. So I don't know how much Harris would move the needle, but whenever she needles Trump, that's a good thing to do. Well, I think it's great.
And one of the things is, yes, of course, the battleground states matter the most for the presidential election, but if you fire up the base in places like New York or California, there are a lot of competitive congressional races there. And so if people are going to vote and they're going to go vote down ballot, we, in New York's 22nd district here, we have a competitive race between John Mannion and Brandon Williams. And if Kamala's voters are going to come out because they're excited and pumped up that she crushed Trump, that can make a difference. Now, it's only September. We got 2 months to go.
I agree. New York State, while you usually think of it as irrelevant, in this case, because of the House races, that and very tight national numbers in terms of the House, it could really matter. So I totally agree with Aaron.
So here's a question. Was the press unfair to Trump? A lot of, certainly Trump felt that way, and a lot of Republicans are saying so. And actually, a lot of our students have said the same. They felt that the press was
They
unfair.
let him go over time so many times.
I agree.
And he
Fact
kept
checking is
talking,
not unfair.
Yes, and that's right. And they only did that a couple of times, and it was in pretty obvious, egregious cases. So I would say no.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, no.
I think they could have fact-checked Kamala Harris, but you know, you have to see, like, if that's the case, then many other things could have fact-checked by him. What was fact-checked? Like egregious lies, that infanticide is legal in US apparently.
Yeah.
And kind of this racist stuff, that Asian immigrants are eating cats and dogs. That's a terrible thing to say, right? So I think it was good that they kind of checked him there.
Okay, now one topic that barely got mentioned in that debate was the future of Social Security and Medicare. Those entitlement programs for older Americans make up the third rail of American politics. No politician wants to touch them for fear they won't get elected. But the current path is not sustainable. Retirees often receive much more in benefits than they pay in. The system increases benefits for future years, and fewer young people are entering the workforce to support it. So, Anirban, how can the system be reformed? Can it be reformed?
So we have talked about this before. Yes, the system is in crisis. And when I look at what economists say, and you know, there are a couple of things, right, that are said that it can save the system. One is to do it means testing, right? Second, increase payroll taxes above $168,000. Why is it capped at that particular point? Why shouldn't it be above it? And another thing is, and this is a little bit esoteric, that the adjustment for computing the increase in the Social Security benefits is based on the consumer price index, which rises at a faster rate, is not based on the consumer price index, I'm sorry, and it is based on the average wage levels, right, and which grows much faster than the consumer price index. So that adjustment could be done also, and then also increasing the retirement age. And these are the three solutions that are politically viable without, you know, turning off a large portion of the crowd.
Rick, could we see a freeze, let's say, in Social Security rises
you're not
for
gonna
just
see
a couple of
freeze.
years?
There will be adjustments, and adjustments can be made. First of all, Social Security already is means tested in how initial benefits are already calculated, their bend points, and it gets, you know, we're not going to get down into the weeds of that unless you'd like to. More than happy to do that. But it's a third rail for a reason. The poverty rate of people 65 and over in this country is below 11%, much lower than the national average. It's been successful at improving the
And that was
standards.
why it was initially created.
That's
was to
right.
keep older Americans out
And
of
there are
poverty.
things, raising the retirement age to 69 while still keeping early retirement possible at 62 is, I think, an issue that would close about a third of the gap. There are a number of things that could be done, raising slightly the tax rate, as Anirban said, raising the income limit. The point is, we've got to get and start doing this now. Unfortunately, both Trump and Harris have been going in the opposite directions in what they've been telling people that they would do, not even taxing the benefits.
If you
doing
say all
sorts.
that, you're not going to be elected, right? I mean,
but they're
that's
gonna
why
have
it's
to
the
do
third rail.
So China is also grappling with this, as many other countries are. And
They just raised
today,
their
they raised their retirement age from 60 to 63 for men and from 55 to 58 for women. But I want to talk about Medicare, the Medicare side of this question, because we've mostly been talking about Social Security. Let me give you shall we call it a concept of a plan. Medicare for all. The system right now is broken. Our healthcare system is broken. It's not just a crisis for how do we fund seniors. We have American families paying $1,400, $1,500 a month for health insurance, having no idea how much they're actually going to pay because we don't have any price, transparency when you are in an ambulance or on a hospital bed. You don't know exactly what things are going to cost, if it's going to be covered. So you're paying more later in premiums. We could fix this whole system. We were talking about it in 2016. Bernie was talking about it for a long time, and it's barely getting a blip of a mention, yet our healthcare system is still in crisis. Obamacare has done wonders for getting rid of the pre-existing condition limitations. It's done wonders for creating more options for health insurance, but it has not fundamentally fixed a broken system.
Jenny.
Well, so with these fine gentlemen, this is not my primary research expertise. But I think a lot about the value systems that are underlying these debates, right? The reason that we can't address some of these core issues in the country is because these diverse perspectives about how it is that we should engage government in supporting ordinary people's lives, right? And so you've got a constituency in the public that says that the government should stay out of our private lives and should not be involved in things like creating a safety net, that that's something that communities and church should do. And you have others who say that there should be an opportunity for everybody to live outside of poverty, to not have to be stressed about their access to health care. And so that debate still is very fundamental, and with our very fractured Congress and their inability to even start a conversation to find some common ground with those two very disparate issues means that this is going to continue to be an ongoing challenge that has to get addressed at some point. My one concern is what often comes out of these debates is small, incremental, tiny changes that don't really address the core problems. And so you end up sort of kicking these problems down the road another 10 years, another 10 years. That's not sustainable. And at some point, I think there really has to be a reckoning about these core value systems that we have.
Well, I just wanted to say I don't believe that anytime soon we're going to see Medicare for all. I think that is off the table. I think, though, that Obamacare has gone a long way to dealing with the problems with health care and people without insurance without, really starting from scratch, because that's what Medicare for all would require.
Governor Hochul's big energy summit was held in Syracuse last week, and it appears the governor is interested in the possibility of building more nuclear power plants in New York. The state released a draft master plan and will begin the process to consider adding advanced nuclear technology to our energy mix. Hochul said it could be part of an all-of-the-above strategy to meet goals for carbon-free energy and the expected rising demand for power. So, Aaron, should the nuclear energy, be part of our solution?
So here's the thing. Nuclear energy already is part of our climate solution. I checked this morning, and as of this morning, 19.76% of our electricity in New York State on our electric grid right now is coming from nuclear energy, 2.5 billion watts. Now, the law says that by 2040, we have to have 100% zero carbon electricity on New York State's electric grid. That's a big lift. That's 15 years from now, and that means we no longer burn climate-polluting fossil fuels like natural gas. But nuclear is zero carbon. It doesn't emit greenhouse gases. And unlike wind and solar, nuclear can provide something really critical to the grid, and that's called base load, right? There's always a certain amount of electricity that has to be on the grid. Wind and solar are intermittent sources. So the other option on a carbon-free grid for base load, and we're going to keep having some hydropower as well, is batteries, big battery farms. Now, those have not proven super popular. We are building them around the country and in New York, right? So her solution and her idea here is we need to provide baseload on a zero carbon grid of the future. We have nuclear already 20% of our electric grid. There's new nuclear technologies out there. We should look at thinking about doing this. Now, of course, we're going to hear about some of the concerns about this.
And I think Anirban has a few.
Yeah, so I am not an expert on this. So I follow this guy, Thomas Wellock, who is the official historian for the Nuclear Regulatory Council, and Daniel Ford, who had written extensively on this in New York and other places. And their main problem or the critique is that the scientists actually do not have any scientific way to calculate the risk. Right? So let's pause and think about that. The scientists do not know. They never knew about what actually the risk is. And the worst, they didn't have the method to even calculate what the risk was. And it's just guesswork, right? And when these fallouts happen, they are terrible, right? And the regulatory commissions kind of knew that. So I guess what comes out of his recent book called Safe Enough, The History of Nuclear Power, is that nuclear power's potential contribution to clean energy has been compromised by safety shortcuts that the industry has historically taken. And the International Energy Agency, Atomic Energy Agency, says that nuclear power will be all but an irrelevant energy source in the world by 2050. Right? And that's IAEA saying that.
Why do they say that? Is that because we have fusion? I mean,
I think the reason that they're saying that because of this prediction that every 7 or 8 years there would be a nuclear fallout. And these people actually predicted these, right? That when would the next nuclear fallout would happen. And he actually said it will happen in Toledo, and this Toledo farm had to pay out this massive damage, right? So my thing is that, yeah, it seems clean, but, the fallouts are terrible. And again, Fukushima, there was this large vat of unspent fuel which would have almost caught on fire, and in which case Tokyo could have been evacuated by that time, right? So it was by a hair inch, right?
okay, Jenny?
Yeah, so I guess one of the problems we have, though, is when there are events that happen at nuclear facilities, they tend to appear very dramatic. But what's hidden is all of the coal miners who are injured or killed in coal mining, which is actually substantially more people per year than what we see with nuclear accidents. But because it's smaller numbers, it's not as dramatic. Cities aren't potentially threatened. It doesn't get the same level of attention. If we're actually going to take climate change seriously, we have to put nuclear on the table. And it does mean really thinking about the regulatory issues that make it very challenging to actually spin up new nuclear power plants, because the regulatory quagmire is spectacular, and it can take decades to get a new plant up and running. So Hochul will have to address that.
And the new plants that have been discussed generally are not plants like the ones we have now,
100%.
although that is what they built recently in Georgia, I believe, or
Yes.
South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Yeah.
And the new one in Wyoming. And so, again, usually mainstream here. And the point that Aaron made is that we're going to have to rely on a variety of energy sources, and so it appears that nuclear should be one. Again, I'm not an expert, and I was happy to hear what you had said about that. Again, we've had innovations on efficiency, safety, and
Congress
economic.
does actually have to figure out what to do with the spent fuel rods, though. That remains an issue.
So some of the new nuclear reactors are small and modular, can do 300 megawatts, which is, like having 300 wind turbines in one little reactor. But here's one of the interesting things about this. There are huge generational dividing lines. I give a lot of public talks about climate change, and I'd say everyone in the audience who has gray hair is like, ooh, nuclear, we don't want that, because of lived experiences with meltdowns. And everyone who's under 30, and I have a class right now of students studying renewable energy solutions and climate solutions, they are all super pro-nuclear, all of them. They're really excited about nuclear energy because they understand the need to create a grid that's carbon-free but has reliable baseload. We can do a lot of that with wind, water, and solar. We can do almost all of it, as you'll hear in my A soon, but we can't quite do all of it, and we need to look at things like nuclear.
That's really surprising that the young
Absolutely.
people are
Yep.
pro-nuclear here. You also just teased the A's and F's. That's the first time I think that's ever happened. Anirban, your F. We'll begin with you.
My F, right, sorry. My F goes to Donald Trump's usage of, or rather the butchering of the English language. Recently in a rally, he said, I have your back, I have your heart, and get this, I have every other part of your body. Finally, we are in a zombie apocalypse. Thank you.
Jenny, your F.
The Last of Us.
That's hard to follow. Okay, so my F goes to J.D. Vance and Donald Trump for amplifying the false story that immigrants from Haiti are eating pets in Springfield, Ohio. The story has been debunked, but Trump shouted it at the debate. Afterwards, a CNN journalist told Vance that city officials said the story is false, but Vance doubled down. NewsGuard reported yesterday that the woman at the heart of the story revealed that she had no firsthand knowledge. She'd only heard about it. A rumor of black immigrants eating pets is racism.
Aaron.
My F goes to the California wildfires. They keep burning. Nearly 1 million acres burned this year and well over 1,000